"Sweetheart, your seat's actually over there," my mother-in-law whispered, pointing to a lonely table near the kitchen doors. I followed her finger. The kitchen doors swung open and shut behind a waiter carrying plates. I could smell garlic and burnt butter drifting out every time they moved. "I'm sorry?" I asked. She gave me a tight smile. "The head table is for immediate family." I looked at the seating chart again. My husband's name was printed in gold at the center. Mine wasn't beside his. "There must be a mistake," I said. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and heavy. "You'll never be real family." A few guests nearby pretended not to hear. One woman let out a nervous laugh. Someone coughed. My face went hot. My chest felt hollow. And that's when the lawyer cleared his throat. "My name is Avery Collins. I'm 34 years old, and that was the moment I realized my wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a test. I'm a high school English teacher. Nothing glamorous. I drive a used Honda that rattles when I start it. I clip coupons. I spend my weekends grading essays about symbolism and coming of age. I married into a family that owns a regional construction company. Big stone house with iron gates. Country club brunch every Sunday. They talk about contracts and golf scores the way other people talk about the weather. They talk about legacy like it's oxygen. From the start, I was the outsider. Not polished enough. Not wealthy enough. Not from the right circles. My mother-in-law, Diane, made that clear the first time I met her. "So you teach?" she'd asked, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes. English." "How sweet. Summers off must be nice." It wasn't a compliment. "She adored my husband's ex, she understood our world," Diane would say. She grew up around success. I grew up around library books and hand-me-down furniture. I wasn't rich. I wasn't glamorous. But I had something they didn't expect. What they saw was a quiet teacher who kept her hands folded and spoke softly. What they didn't see was how closely my father-in-law had been watching everything. If you've ever felt like you didn't fit into a room you worked so hard to enter, this story is for you. Sometimes being underestimated is a hidden advantage. If you've ever been treated like the outsider in your own family, you'll understand this. Have you ever been seated away from the people who were supposed to love you? Let's go. At the reception, the music was bright and cheerful. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter floated across the ballroom. I walked toward the head table, smoothing my dress. That's when I saw it clearly. My husband's place card sat between his mother and his brother. There was no card for me. Instead, near the catering station, taped slightly crooked to the edge of a small round table, was a card with my name, Avery Collins. By the kitchen doors, I felt the heat from the ovens every time they opened. The smell of roasted meat mixed with cleaning chemicals. I walked back toward Diane. "There's no seat for me at the head table." She didn't lower her voice this time. "Traditionally, only immediate family sits there." "I'm his wife," I said quietly. She sipped her champagne. "That's still new." A few guests turned to look at us. My husband stood across the room talking to a group of relatives. He hadn't noticed yet. Diane lifted her glass and tapped it gently with a spoon. The room hushed. "To family," she said, smiling wide. "The people who truly belong." There were scattered cheers. Applause. My hands started shaking. I could feel eyes on me. I could hear whispers. "Isn't she the bride? Why is she over there?" I swallowed hard. "Excuse me," I said, and stepped away before my voice cracked. I had just reached the hallway when I heard it. A firm, steady voice. "Ladies and gentlemen." I turned. Mr. Halpern, the family's lawyer for over 30 years, stood near the center of the room. His suit was dark, his posture straight. He cleared his throat again. "There is a brief matter I've been instructed to address this evening." Diane's smile vanished. "Now," she said sharply, "this is a wedding." Mr. Halpern nodded calmly. It was Harold's final wish. The name hung in the air. My father-in-law had passed away 3 months earlier. The grief was still fresh. Or at least it was for me. The room fell quiet. Even the band stopped playing. Diane's fingers tightened around her glass. "This is inappropriate." "With respect," the lawyer replied, "your husband requested that a specific addendum to his will be read at the next formal gathering of the family." A murmur spread across the tables. My heart started pounding. I had no idea what he was about to say. Mr. Halpern opened a slim leather folder. This addendum, he continued, contains a personal statement and a directive regarding share allocation. Diane let out a short laugh. Harold barely knew Avery, she said loudly. This must be some clerical error. My name hit the room like a dropped plate. I froze. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked directly at her. There is no error, he said. Then he looked down at the page. And this clause specifically mentions Avery Collins. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The room felt smaller. The music had stopped completely, and all I could hear was the soft hum of the air conditioner above us. Diane stepped forward. That's impossible, she said, her voice sharp. Harold barely knew Avery. That wasn't true. Every Sunday for 6 months, I drove to the hospital to sit with my father-in-law during his chemo treatments. The room always smelled like antiseptic and plastic tubing. Machines beeped in slow, steady rhythms. Most days no one else came. I would bring him books. Sometimes poetry. Sometimes old mystery novels. You don't have to keep coming, he told me once, his voice weak but warm. I want to, I said. Tell me how you're really feeling. He looked at me for a long moment. You're the only one who asks. Back in the ballroom, Diane crossed her arms. Harold was very sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. Mr. Halpern's expression didn't change. Medical evaluations confirming his full mental capacity are attached to this document. A cousin near the back whispered, "Did she talk him into something?" Another voice added, "She's good with words. That's what teachers do." The humiliation shifted. It wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was suspicion. My husband walked toward me, confusion written all over his face. "Avery," he murmured, "did you know about this?" His question stung more than anything Diane had said. "No," I whispered. "I didn't." Diane seized the moment. "You see," she said loudly. "This is exactly what I mean." She inserted herself into his life when he was vulnerable. "I visited him," I replied, my voice shaking. "That's all." "You were always there," Diane snapped. "Always hovering." I remembered another afternoon in the hospital. Rain had tapped against the window. Harold stared at the gray sky. "Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty," he told me quietly. I learned that the hard way. I didn't understand what he meant then. I think I do now. Back in the present, Diane turned to the guests. "This reading will ruin the wedding," she declared. "It can wait." "It cannot," Mr. Halpern replied. "Your husband legally required this clause be read before any distribution of assets." "Distribution," Diane repeated. The word echoed around the room. She moved closer to me, her smile tight and cold. "Whatever stunt you pulled won't make you one of us," she hissed under her breath. "I didn't pull anything," I said. My hands were trembling, but I kept my chin up. For the first time all evening, people weren't looking at me with pity. They were watching her. Mr. Halpern continued, steady and calm. "Harold amended his will 2 weeks before his passing. 2 weeks before he passed. That was when he had asked me to promise something. We had been alone in his hospital room. The late afternoon sun had cast long shadows across the floor. "Promise me you'll stay strong," he said. "I don't understand," I replied. "You will," he answered. At the time, I thought it was about grief. About losing him. Now I wondered if it was about this. What they didn't know was that Harold and I had long conversations. Not about money. About regret. About mistakes he couldn't fix. He told me once, "I built a company. I built a name. But I'm not sure I built a family." I never repeated that to anyone. 2 weeks before he passed, he handed me a small stack of letters. All in his handwriting. "Keep these," he said. "In case you ever doubt yourself." I still had them. Locked in a drawer at home. I had documentation. Conversations. Proof of the bond we shared. But I had never imagined he would go this far. I didn't marry into this family for money. I married the man I loved. The shares, the house, the country club, none of it mattered to me. But Harold had been watching. Watching the way Diane dismissed me. Watching the way I still showed up. And somewhere in that sealed envelope was the proof that I wasn't an outsider. Mr. Halpern adjusted his glasses again. He looked directly at Diane. Your husband was very clear, he said. Diane let out a soft, dismissive laugh and leaned toward a cluster of relatives. Whatever it is, she whispered loudly enough for me to hear, it's minor. Harold wouldn't jeopardize his own blood. Her confidence was almost arrogant. She had controlled every holiday, every business dinner, every decision for decades. She assumed she would control this too. My husband stood beside me now. His hand hovered near mine but didn't quite hold it. Mom, he said carefully, maybe we should just listen. The room felt divided. Some faces showed curiosity. Others showed fear. Loyalty hung in the air like a storm about to break. Mr. Halpern placed the envelope on the table in front of him. I will now read the addendum in full, he announced. The paper slid free with a soft whisper. Every eye in the ballroom fixed on him. The envelope was finally open. The paper trembled slightly in Mr. Halpern's hands, but his voice was steady. I, Harold Collins, being of sound mind and verified medical capacity, hereby amend my will as follows. A fork clinked against a plate somewhere in the back. No one moved after that. I leave 40% of my personal shares in Collins Regional Construction to my daughter-in-law, Avery Collins. The words hit like a shockwave. Gasps filled the room. Someone actually said, "What?" Diane shot to her feet, so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. That's impossible. Mr. Halpern calmly lifted a second document. These papers are notarized and supported by 2 independent medical evaluations confirming full mental competence. Diane's face turned pale. He was sick. He was clear, the lawyer replied. Then he continued reading. To Avery, who treated me like family before she had the title. My throat tightened. I could see Harold in that hospital bed, sunlight across his blanket, his thin hand resting over mine. I never asked him for anything, I said, my voice steady now. I just showed up. Diane pointed at me. She manipulated you, she snapped, as if Harold could still hear her. She preyed on your guilt. Mr. Halpern didn't flinch. There is one final clause. The room went still again. In the event that any beneficiary contests this amendment publicly or through legal action, their portion of the inheritance will be forfeited and redistributed according to the remaining structure of the will. Silence. Diane froze. Her anger was visible. So was the calculation behind her eyes. If she kept fighting, she could lose everything. My husband stepped fully to my side then. This time he took my hand. Mom, he said quietly but firmly, stop. It was the first time I had ever heard him speak to her that way. The power in the room shifted in seconds. A few minutes ago, I had been the bride seated near the kitchen doors, smelling burnt butter and cleaning spray. Now I was legally part owner of the company that funded the very ballroom we stood in. Diane slowly sat back down. She said nothing. The reception resumed, but it wasn't the same. Conversations were hushed. Eyes followed me, not with pity this time, but with something closer to respect. An aunt approached me near the dessert table. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't realize. A cousin nodded at me across the room. Small gestures. Quiet shifts. Diane avoided my gaze for the rest of the night. She kept her smile in place for photos, but it never reached her eyes. In the weeks that followed, I attended my first board meeting. I wore a simple navy suit. I brought notes. When I walked into that conference room, no one told me to sit near the door. I sat at the table. As a shareholder, there were whispers at first. Doubts. Questions about whether a high school English teacher understood construction contracts. I understand people, I said during one meeting. And people build companies. Harold had once told me that leadership wasn't about volume. It was about steadiness. I chose not to humiliate Diane. I didn't need to. Instead, I invested part of my shares into a scholarship fund in Harold's name. It supports students who want to study literature or business but can't afford tuition. At the announcement event, I spoke briefly. Harold believed legacy wasn't just about buildings, I said. It's about who you lift up. Diane stood in the back of the room that day. Quiet. Watching. I didn't win by fighting. I won because someone saw my worth before they did. And I never needed their permission to belong. Have you ever been told you don't belong in your own family? That you'd never be real to them? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe if you've ever been treated like the outsider at your own table. Click hype to help this story reach someone who needs it. Your story has power. If you felt a connection to mine, subscribe and share your journey below. Every hype helps empower someone else. Thank you for being here. And thank you for listening.